My mother threatens to throw me out of the house. When I donated my bonus to save our family store, but my brother told everyone at church that I stole it, I was humiliated. You're dead to me, Mom screamed. A month later, the bishop came to our house with a letter that made my brother cry in front of everyone. So here's the thing. I gave up my year-end bonus money I'd planned to use to finally move out of my mother's house and used it instead to save our family's dying hardware store. My mother, Mireille, had been overwhelmed with the books and past due invoices, and I couldn't just let everything my grandfather built fall apart. I paid off the debt quietly, not out of shame, but because I didn't need applause. That store wasn't just a building. It was our family's pride. And I thought stupidly that my sacrifice would go unnoticed in the best way possible, quietly saving the day. But a week later, my older brother, Jerome, stood up in front of our entire extended family at dinner and accused me of stealing money from the store. Just like that. As if he'd practiced the words in front of a mirror. And my mom? She didn't even blink. Didn't ask me a single question. She screamed at me. Called me a disgrace. Told me I was dead to her. That's the last thing she said before I walked out of the house in the middle of a cold January night, ashamed and shaking. That's the kind of betrayal I'm talking about. And revenge? That's coming. But let me tell you how it all unraveled first. I hadn't even taken my coat off when I noticed something was off at the Sunday family dinner. Gloria, Jerome's wife, was buzzing around their kitchen like a wasp on espresso. She wouldn't look me in the eye. My mom was already seated at the table, unusually quiet. She didn't even say hello when I walked in. Jerome stood behind her chair, his hands resting on the back like some old Southern patriarch, waiting to drop a verdict. Noelle, he started, tone sickeningly calm. I've been going through the books. I blinked. The books? For the store, he said. Gloria and I noticed a couple discrepancies last week. Cash drawer totals. Deposits missing. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe it was just an error, he continued, but then we looked at your personal account. What? I snapped. You looked at my personal. I'm just trying to protect Mom, he cut in, raising a hand. You've been the one managing things. And now, with the shortages. What are you saying, Jerome? Gloria finally chimed in. We think maybe you've been borrowing. Borrowing, I repeated. I almost laughed. My mom stood up so fast her chair squeaked against the tile. You took money from me? No. I didn't. Mom, I used my bonus. I saved the damn store. She didn't even hesitate. You're dead to me. Those 4 words hit harder than the cold wind that slammed into me when I left their house a minute later. I moved out the next day. Packed what little I had and moved into a spare room that belonged to my old piano teacher's sister, this sweet older lady named Mrs. Fry. She offered the room for dirt cheap because she said I reminded her of her niece who married a bad man and lost everything. Not a perfect comparison, but I took it. I didn't even tell my coworkers what happened. I went to work, came home, and stared at the ceiling. People in our small town hear things fast, especially from church. And oh, they heard. They looked at me with sideways glances when I passed them at the co-op. At the gas station. One woman I'd known since high school clutched her purse tighter when I walked past her in the cereal aisle. The humiliation didn't come from being accused. It came from being instantly believed guilty. No one asked for my side of the story. Not one. And the worst part? I still loved my mother. I kept wondering what I could have done differently to make her believe me. Was I too cold? Too closed off? Too quick to fix instead of explain? Meanwhile, Jerome paraded around town, acting like the self-appointed guardian of the family legacy. The store had been his footnote until now. He never cared about it until it gave him something to hold over someone else's head. But Jerome made one mistake. He got greedy. He tried to take the story even further by applying for a restoration loan from the church. I found out later that he used doctored records of the store's losses to convince the church board that we were in a financial crisis. His plan was to get the money and invest it, then rescue the store like some hero. But the bishop's finance committee wasn't stupid. And someone on that team happened to know a friend of mine who used to volunteer at the store. She vouched for me. Gave them my number. So when they called, I gave them everything: copies of the invoices I paid, my bank statements, the check deposit, the dated emails from suppliers confirming the cleared balances. I expected it to be buried. But Bishop Rollins didn't bury it. He showed up in person with a sealed letter and a very quiet but intense determination in his voice. Bishop Rollins had never been to our home before. He was a tall, soft-spoken man with a measured gait and the kind of calm that could hush a crowded room without raising his voice. I was at work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it twice, then finally answered on the third ring. Ms. Noel Gardner? The voice asked. Yes. This is Bishop Rollins. I'd like to speak with you. Are you available later today? That was it. No explanation. No small talk. That afternoon, he was sitting in Mrs. Frey's parlor, across from me, sipping the sweet tea she insisted on serving him. He pulled a manila folder from his leather bag and laid it on the table. I believe, he said, that a wrong has been done. I didn't cry, though part of me wanted to. I just nodded. We cross-referenced financial statements submitted by your brother with the church's due diligence process, he said. Things did not add up. I watched his hands as he spoke. Calm. Precise. He moved like someone who'd done this before, not just praying with people, but investigating them. Thank you for providing your records, he added. They were illuminating. He didn't have to say more. That Sunday, everything changed. Word got around that Bishop Rollins would be making a statement during the second service. I didn't attend, but someone recorded it. I watched it that afternoon in the quiet of my borrowed room, the sunlight spilling through a thin curtain, the video buffering every few seconds from Mrs. Frey's spotty internet. He read the letter out loud. My name was mentioned clearly, as was Jerome's. The findings were listed plainly: the date of my bonus, the exact invoices I paid off, the altered spreadsheets Jerome submitted to the church committee. Gasps filled the room after each point. And then the final line from the bishop: this was not merely an accounting error. This was a deception. They said Jerome stood up and tried to leave, but Gloria grabbed his arm and whispered something that made him sit back down. I imagined her eyes flashing not with concern for me, of course, but with panic about how this would affect her social standing. They'd always been a performance couple. And then, in the last moments of the service, Jerome began to cry. Not quite sniffles. Sobbing. Not for what he did but because the mask had slipped. People watched as the golden child's crown cracked in real time. After that day, I started getting calls. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't interested in people who only remembered how to dial my number once my name was cleared. But a few days later, I picked up when my mom called. I don't know why. Maybe I still hoped she'd say something that could bridge what she'd done. The line was quiet for several seconds before I heard her voice. Noel. I didn't know. She sounded smaller than I remembered. And older. I was so sure. Jerome said you'd been acting strange, and when he showed me the numbers, I just didn't even stop to think. There was a long pause, then she whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence speak for me. You have every right not to forgive me, she said. I was wrong. I can't believe I ever said what I did. I miss you. That part? That was true. I think she did miss me. But I wasn't sure she missed me, her daughter, or just the version of me that fit neatly into the role of silent helper, fixer, scapegoat when convenient. Still, I said, I need time. And I hung up. After that, the tone around town shifted. Some of the same people who once looked through me now wanted to talk. I wasn't eager to accept their sudden change of heart, but I wasn't cruel either. I just smiled and nodded. A woman named Doris, who'd once organized the church bake sales with a grip on control so tight it could choke a cupcake, left a pie at Mrs. Frey's doorstep with a note tucked under the plastic wrap. We were wrong, it read. No name. Just those 3 words in shaky cursive. It was the kind of quiet admission that tells you everything about the person who wrote it. I didn't eat the pie, but I kept the note. A week later, I got a visit from the store's landlord, Mr. Hargrave. He was a barrel-chested man in his 70s with a hearing aid and a love of local gossip. He'd never liked Jerome and said he was too slick for a family businessman. I heard about what happened, he said bluntly. Figured it might be time we had a conversation. What kind of conversation? I asked. Well, he said, leaning against the fence, your mama's lease is up in 6 months. I'm not inclined to renew it under her name. I tilted my head. Why not? Because she ain't the one who saved that store. I looked at him, unsure where he was going. If you're interested, he said, pulling a folded document from his jacket, I'd rather negotiate with you. He offered me the lease and the right of first refusal if he ever sold the building. Said the way I handled myself proved more than Jerome's Sunday suits ever could. I didn't give him an answer right away. I spent that night staring at the document, thinking about the years I'd spent scrubbing floors, restocking shelves, keeping track of supplier accounts while Jerome did photo ops and left early for dinner parties. I thought about how many people only saw value in my work when it came with a spotlight. And I thought about revenge. Not the kind with fire and fury, but the kind that lingers in a nameplate, a door sign, a legacy restored with no help from the ones who tried to burn it down. It took a week before I called Mr. Hargrave back. When I finally did, I told him I wanted the lease. And if he was serious about the first right of refusal on the building, I wanted that in writing too. He didn't even hesitate. Smart girl, he said. About time that place had your name on the books, not just the receipts. We finalized everything by the end of the month. I didn't tell my mother until after the paperwork was signed and notarized. Not out of spite, at least not consciously. But because I didn't owe her that anymore. She had forfeited the right to my plans the moment she believed Jerome over me without a single question. When I finally walked back into the store for the first time in 6 weeks, the air was different. The familiar creak of the wooden floorboards, the scent of sawdust and motor oil, it all still felt like home. But this time it was mine. Not ours. Mine. My mom was behind the counter. She looked thinner, paler, like whatever had unraveled between us had also torn into her sleep. She stood up when she saw me. Noelle, she said, cautiously. I didn't know you were coming. I'm not staying long, I replied, and placed the lease copy on the counter. She didn't touch it. Just looked at it like it might burst into flames. What is this? It's the new lease. Hargrave gave it to me. Her eyes flicked up, alarmed. But the store is still here, I said calmly. And I'm taking it over. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just stared. You're still welcome to work a few shifts, if you want, I added, quieter. But I'm managing everything from now on. There was a silence then, heavy and thick. Finally, she nodded. Slowly. The kind of nod that comes when someone realizes the ground beneath them has shifted permanently. Okay, she said. Okay. The first thing I did was change the name. Gardner's Supply and Home became Noelle's Hardware and Home. Not because I wanted to erase my family, but because I needed something of my own. A claim to my own story. A way to finally step out from under the shadow I'd lived in for too long. The second thing I did was reopen the vendor accounts under my name, update the branding, repaint the exterior, and get rid of the dusty display that Jerome insisted we keep because people liked nostalgia. Nostalgia didn't pay bills. And you know what? People came back. Not all of them. Not the ones who'd whispered behind my back and tried to avoid me at the supermarket. But enough. The regulars who remembered me from my childhood. The retired electricians who always asked for my advice on the best wire gauge. Even a few younger customers who appreciated the new signage and online order options I rolled out. Slowly, the store felt alive again. Jerome, for the most part, disappeared. He still lived in town, but I rarely saw him. Gloria stopped coming to the church for a while. I heard through the grapevine that Jerome was still trying to explain things privately. He'd framed it as a misunderstanding during a stressful time for the business. Nobody really bought it. Not after Bishop Rollins spoke. The church didn't ban him, but he lost his speaking privileges, and his family's donation requests started getting side-eyed during Sunday service. He never apologized. Not to me. Not directly. Instead, I started getting little signs. A fruit basket left anonymously at the store. A donation envelope slipped into our mailbox with no return address. I didn't touch them. I didn't need his apologies wrapped in guilt offerings. My mother kept her word. She came in 3 times a week, stocked shelves, answered phones, and left quietly when her shifts ended. We didn't talk much, but we didn't fight either. And maybe that's the best we'll ever get. Not healing. Not closure. But a kind of truce, one rooted in shared space and unspoken regret. Once, on a particularly slow afternoon, she stood behind the counter while I updated inventory on the tablet. "I used to think you weren't tough enough," she said softly. I looked up, surprised. "You always kept things to yourself," she continued. Quiet. Patient. I mistook that for weakness. I didn't know what to say. She looked at the ceiling, then at the floor. "You're stronger than all of us. Including me." She didn't say she was sorry again. She didn't have to. That was as close as she could get. I nodded, not looking up. "I know." By spring, the store had settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I had hired 2 part-time assistants, Raphael, a kid who reminded me of myself at 19, and Darlene, a retired teacher who said she needed something to do with her hands besides crossword puzzles. Together, we restocked, organized, painted, and modernized the whole place. We even started offering community repair classes on Saturdays. One of my favorite things became the small, chalkboard sign we kept outside the entrance. Every morning, either I or Darlene would scribble something funny or wise. One morning, I wrote, "Family doesn't always mean loyalty. Loyalty doesn't always come from family." It stayed up all week. A lot of people noticed it. I think one of them was Jerome. I hadn't seen him since the bishop's address. But on the first warm day of May, he walked into the store. He didn't say hello. Just stood in the center aisle, looking around at the walls freshly painted, reorganized, brighter. I was near the back, marking a shipment of drill bits. I didn't move toward him, and I didn't stop working. He made his way to the counter, where my mom was wiping down the glass. "Hey," he said. She looked up. Her face didn't change. "We're open till 5. He nodded slowly. "I just wanted to see it." "You've seen it." Silence. Then, quieter, "It looks good." I didn't go up front. I didn't give him the satisfaction of thinking I owed him an audience. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds longer, then turned and left. That was the last time he ever came by. The revenge wasn't explosive. There was no confrontation, no grand reveal, no town hall moment where I humiliated him the way he tried to humiliate me. The revenge was quiet. It was the way customers smiled when they walked in and said, "This place feels good now." It was watching Gloria avoid me at the farmer's market while I handed out store coupons that brought in a rush of new business. It was seeing my mother's shoulders gradually sink with the weight of humility, not bitterness. It was the bishop stopping by one afternoon with his wife to buy a hose adapter, looking around with a gentle smile and saying, "This is how restoration looks." It was owning the space that once nearly broke me and making it mine, top to bottom. A few weeks later, I hosted Airy opening celebration. Nothing fancy. Just a grill, some folding chairs, and a sign that said thanks for sticking with us. Neighbors came. Even people who'd stayed silent during the scandal showed up, trying to ease their way back into my good graces. I let them. I wasn't interested in keeping score. Not anymore. But I never forgot. Especially not when one man walked up to me near the end of the event, holding a soda and looking nervously at the shop window. "You really turned this place around," he said. "My brother-in-law said it wouldn't last." "What do you think now?" I asked. He looked at the crowd of kids playing near the mulch bags, retirees swapping gardening tips, and a line of folks waiting to enter the raffle. "I think you were always the one holding it together." I smiled. Glad someone noticed. A few days after that, I found a letter slipped into the after-hours drop box. No name. Just my first name written in block letters. Inside was a note. Asterisk, "I never deserved your grace. I destroyed trust that was built before I was even born. I lied because I couldn't stand that you were better at this than me. That people respect you more, even when they didn't say it out loud. You didn't just save the store. You reminded people what integrity looks like. I hope you never forget that asterisk. J asterisk." I folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it in the back of my desk drawer under the ledger book. Not because I forgave him, but because it was proof. Proof that the truth always finds its way to the surface. Even when it takes time. I never wrote back to Jerome. I didn't need to. There's a power in silence that people don't talk about enough. Not the kind born from avoidance or fear, but the kind that says, "I no longer need your apology to heal." For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking validation. I wasn't clinging to hope that the people who hurt me would suddenly become the ones to lift me up. I had done that for myself. And with every day that passed, with every customer who thanked me, every vendor who called me by name instead of Mary's daughter, every young woman who asked me how I got into the hardware business, I reclaimed a little more of what had been taken. That summer, the store was doing better than it had in a decade. We expanded our inventory, started offering weekend workshops for DIY repairs, and even sponsored a booth at the town's fall festival. Our Instagram, yes, our Instagram, grew by over 3,000 followers after we posted a time-lapse video of our front window getting redesigned. The town had found its way back to me, one smile at a time. And my mother? She never said the words "I was wrong" again. She didn't have to. Her posture changed. She stopped raising her voice when she didn't understand something. She started listening more, asking questions. One day she brought in an old photograph of my grandfather, framed it, and hung it next to the register. "Thought he should be watching the store again," she said quietly. We still weren't close the way we once were, but we were honest. There was a strange peace in that. A kind of stillness where the storm had once lived. I eventually moved out of Mrs. Frey's spare room and into a cottage just 10 minutes from the store, small, cozy, with wild azaleas growing along the back fence. I painted the door a deep navy blue and planted herbs by the kitchen window. Most evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea and listen to the cicadas start up as the sun dipped behind the trees. It was quiet. Beautifully, finally quiet. No chaos. No accusations. No shouting. Just the steady rhythm of a life I built with my own two hands. People sometimes ask me if I ever reconciled with Jerome. I tell them the truth. No. And that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a reunion. It isn't pretending nothing happened. Sometimes it's just loosening the grip on pain so it doesn't control your next step. He still lives nearby. Still go to the same church. Still plays the role of the humble family man. But people see him differently now. Not because I told them to, but because the truth changed the shape of his mask. And me? I don't carry that weight anymore. My revenge wasn't shouting or tearing him down. It was owning what he tried to steal. Rising higher while he watched from the pews. And knowing, deep down, that I never had to destroy him. He did that all on his own.